Hello, welcome to the first in this series that I'm doing on Inkscape for guitar design. Now you can use Inkscape for lots of things. I just thought it would be good to make a tutorial about some of the ways that I use it in case that's helpful. So first of all, I'm on this page here right now, inkscape.org. So this is where you get it from, and you can download it here. I think you can get other versions here because I think what I did. So this is 1.2.2. Okay, so here I am actually in the program with a blank project here. And if you go about in Inkscape, it shows that I'm in Inkscape 1.2.1, which is probably because I forget what was going on before, but that was better for me than the newer version. There were a lot of things going on that I was trying to fix, and I just reverted to an older version, which you can do. But anyways, you can get it there. It is open source. It can be buggy sometimes, and that's one of the things that you have to deal with open source software. But to show you how I'm using this for this application, I'm going to throw up some pictures here of one of the guitars that I've designed in Inkscape that I actually finished. This is, I call it the Portland. I designed this I don't know, maybe 12 years ago, and finally just did a bunch of work on it a couple years ago. So this is what I call the color mock-up, showing what the colors would look like, and also the side profile, and basically getting it as close as I could in Inkscape to what it would actually look like. And then here are actually the plans that I used to get all of the templates and stuff made. So ideally you would have this printed up as a full-scale graphic that you can refer to, in addition to printing out different layers for the templates, and we'll go through all that later on. And then here is an actual photo of the guitar that I took once it got to this point. It still needs many coats of lacquer before. There's basically no lacquer on it in this photo. There isn't any right now either. I need to get that done before I would call it a finished guitar, so it's kind of just waiting for that. So anyways, that's kind of like what we're looking at being able to do. So I'm going to bring up some of the files here that I have opened. So what we're looking at here, this is one that I designed probably just a couple of weeks ago. I kind of got the idea for this from the Gibson ES335. I wanted to do a flat top version of it, a little bit smaller body, and these are my kind of like custom original design sound holes, or F holes if you want to call them that, on there. So here is what I'm going to use to show things that I'm going to be using throughout the rest of this series. So first of all, we're going to be scrolling. So up and down if you have a mouse with a scroll wheel, that's up and down on the scroll wheel right here. Hitting shift with the scroll wheel goes side to side, and hitting control with the scroll wheel goes in and out, or zooms in and out. So that's much handier than trying to, I think you can go look for this little thing. That's annoying, and then you have to go, I don't even know how to get the minus because I never do it that way. So anyways, I just use the, when you're on the main arrow tool, you just use the scroll thing for that scroll wheel. When you are moving things, so I'm gonna be jumping around between this and this other project here that I just threw together to show some of this stuff. Just threw some shapes on a page. So let's say you're moving this, you select that, and I'm hitting the Alt key and the arrows. So the arrow keys will move this back and forth, or up and down, or whatever. If you hit the Shift key, you can jump even further, and then with the Alt key, it's like very, very small, minute movements with that. And I'll be pointing that out as I'm using that for some of the things that I'm going to show here. There's an easy way to do flipping horizontal and vertical without going through the menus. You just H and it flips horizontally, V on the keyboard flips vertically. So that's, I try to, anything you can do to not use the menus, because there's just too many, you're doing too many things over and over, or one after another. So then anytime you're like, let's say you're on, like, I don't know, I'm just going to choose this weird spiral tool that I never use here. You're not using that anymore, hit the space bar and it goes back. So it goes back to the normal arrow tool to grab stuff. This is one thing I do a lot. You're going to join two objects. So you select them both, and up here under path is union, but it also says, and you can find these shortcuts if you want. If there's something I'm not showing you the shortcut for, you can always find it. Control plus. So here I'm going to go Control plus. It joins them. And just like you would expect, you go Control minus, and it deletes what's on the top. Now, and I'm also hitting Control Z to undo. You can Control Y to redo. If I were to, okay, here's another thing. I'm going to page down, and it brings it underneath. Page up brings it on top. Home key brings it all the way up to the top. End key brings it all the way down. So if we had multiple objects, that's what you would use that for, if you wanted this just to be on the top. But anyways, if that's on the top, Control minus cuts the square out of the circle. So that is a big part of how you can easily make stuff out of basic shapes instead of having to actually draw the lines you want to use. Then your other, like, I'm sure this is the same in a lot of different programs, but Control copy is going to copy that, and then you go somewhere else and paste it, right? Control V is to paste. But let's say, like, you copy that and then you move the mouse and then you want to paste it. Maybe you want to paste it on top of the other thing. So here, Control copy, and then Control Alt V pastes it right on top. Now you can't see it, but it's on top of there, so I'm going to change the color. Now it's pink, and you can see that the green one is still under there. So that's really good for, like, some of the things we're going to do where, like, you have a body shape and you want to create the outline for the binding, which is the same shape. You want to copy that and make sure it's right on top. So other shortcuts are, you'd be able to find them. You'd be able to find them up here. If you hover over the square tool, it's a rectangle. It says R. So you hit the R key, you're able to make a rectangle. So one of the tools that I use a lot is the Bezier, and that's this one. All you have to do to get to that is hit the B, and that's what you use to draw curves and shapes like that. Hit that, and see, that's a thing now. So the other thing we want to know, and I'll go back over to this, layers. We're going to be using layers. So it's called layers and objects. In the new version, you can actually choose to show objects or switch to layers only view. But basically what's going on here is you have all these layers are layers that I made and named. So let's get rid of one here. Let's take the mahogany back away, and let's get rid of the neck, and we're going to get rid of the fretboard. See how things disappear there? And I'm just going to start getting rid of everything that's on here, making sure that we can't see it. Now, here if I go to view the body profile, well, that's a side view thing, so let me go back here. That's the mahogany back. So this is the big piece of mahogany that makes up the body. Then the maple top is on top of that. That's what that would look like. It would have the F holes and the control holes, and it would have the neck pocket. The neck, show that. And what would the neck look like without the mahogany and the maple pieces? It would look like that. So that's how we're going to be using layers, and what happens if you go down here is it'll show you all of the different objects in that layer. So if if I select one of these circles, it's going to show me what that is. I can drag this to a different layer if I don't want it on this one. And that's something that will be happening. And I'm going to bring all of these back again so you get the full. And on this version, the little eye icon goes away if it's being viewed. You only see the eye if you're hiding it. So, and now I'm viewing everything. So the other thing to know is this is an outline view. You can see you can zoom out and you can see all the lines relatively thick, but you zoom in and they don't get huge, right? So that's outline view. If you look down here, there is no fill and no stroke on any of these objects, which in this view is fine because you're just viewing all of the outlines. So this is the view that I tend to work in the most, doing this kind of thing. You can also switch to normal view, which the only thing it has here is the strings on these ones because I think those are a stroke. We'll get into that. But anyways, you can't see anything because I don't like to have a fill or a stroke on the objects when I'm in outline view. So I'm going to show you that on this project that we did here. So none of these have a stroke. I can give it a stroke. Stroke paint, make that black, and see how thick that is because it's 31 3/4 millimeters thick. I can reduce that. Let's say I like to usually go 0.1 millimeters. Now the stroke is super thin. You can hardly see it, but if you zoom in, it'll get thicker and thicker and thicker. So the stroke will be proportional to your zoom in normal view. I think it's not good to use a stroke unless you need to deal with thicknesses. So here I'm going to come down here. I'm going to select that object, grab this little X and drag it over to the stroke swatch, and that gets rid of it. It still has the fill, that's okay. For now, it doesn't matter in outline view. I can go over here, outline, and everything's there. You just see it all as strokes and you can see the stuff behind it. If you're doing if you're joining and subtracting objects, then maybe you don't know what's on top of what in this view. So that's when it's useful to go into normal view. It's also good if you're in. So when you're in normal view, you can go split mode and you can wipe between the two modes so that, let's say you're mostly working in outline view, but you're going to be joining objects and subtracting objects from one another. Here you swipe over to see what's on top of what in that layer. Or you can change the split mode to X-ray. That way, whenever you hover over something, you can see what's going on. So if you know you're going to be jumping around a lot, you can use one of those two options. Back to outline. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Beziers are how you're going to be tweaking shapes and stuff. Basically, Bezier shapes have these what's called nodes. So here, this tool here, edit paths by nodes, and these are the nodes. These are all the parts in the shape that actually define what the line is doing, and this is the whole key behind vector graphics, is that it's information and not pixels. So these are the handles. You can drag in and out. You can get rid of a handle by dragging it back to the node if you want what's more of a corner. And you can use these up here if you want to change how the handles come out of the nodes. You can make them corners. Here I'm going to make it smooth. You can make it symmetrical by choosing that tool. And what is this one? Auto smooth. I'm not sure what auto smooth is. I'm just not sure. I don't use it. So nodes are going to be used in that way, and then it's good to know between like what's an object, what's a path. A square is an object, but you can see here that's not a node right there. If I grab the node tool and hit that circle, it's actually going to give you a radius on the corners, which is nice if that's what you want to do. But let's say you want to drag just that corner somewhere. Then what you want to do is change this to, it's an object right now, you want to change it to a path. Object to path. Now you can move just that without it doesn't need to be a square anymore. It just, you're going to move just that node and the other lines are going to come with it. A stroke to path, and this is what I use when I'm adding strings to a design. And I'm going to do one other thing here too. I'm going to make this for a Bezier. You just, you click somewhere and it makes a line. Hit Control, it keeps it straight, and then double click to end it. If you want to draw a handle when you're starting your Bezier, then click and drag to make the handle, and then you can click and drag to do the other handle, and then double click to end it. But anyways, here's a straight line that I made. Now there's a stroke on it. You're going to be constantly getting rid of strokes. You'll notice them when you'll see a little dotted line that seems like, when you're in outline mode, you'll see a little dotted line that seems like it shouldn't be there. So here we have a path or a line that we are going to give. It's under object. The menu is always like, I always get lost in the menus here. Fill and stroke. The other thing you can do is right here, fill and stroke. But these can go away. You can choose to get rid of these. So I can get rid of that, I can get rid of that, I can get rid of that, but then you can bring them back up by going up here. So fill and stroke, I still have that line selected. Here I'm going to select stroke paint. See how the dotted line comes up? We'll go into normal view, and that's why. See? It shows the stroke. The stroke makes the object, even if it's just a line, it makes the object. It gives it a width or a thickness to it. But let's just use a string. Let's say you're going to have 10s on your guitar. So let's go to inches. Like a high E string would be 0.010 inches wide. There's the width of our string. So but that's a stroke right now. So let's make that into an object that is 10 thousandths of an inch thick by going stroke to path. Now it's not a path anymore. It's an object. You can go here and you can see it's just a really long rectangle. So that is good because you can, when I make frets and stuff, you go to outline mode and it shows you that object that is basically like, it looks like a line but it has some thickness to it. So rather than, this is a way to deal with strokes in a way that you can view like a thickness in outline view, if that makes any sense. I'll do more of that when we add strings to a design. So there's some other things that are going to be useful here that I'm just going to show really quickly. Like take these three parts here. I'm going to go here to align and distribute, and all these things will show up on the right here while you're using them. Now I didn't pay attention to which one I selected first or whatever, but let's just say we want them all centered. There, now they're all centered, right? Undo that. But let's say I want this square to stay where it is. Everything else on the page Everything else on the page I want centered relative to that. So I'll have to click on everything individually, and then I'm going to choose center on horizontal axis this time. And it centers everything that I clicked on according to that. You can also, and maybe this is a better way to do that. I'm just going to make a bunch of circles here, copy and paste them. Imagine they're like pull pieces for some pickups. So we're going to, relative to the first selected, we're going to center those there, but now they're not distributed properly. So let's just distribute them evenly. So you find out where you want your first one, find out where you want your last one, and then you hit distribute. This one that I did was distribute the centers equidistantly, and it does that automatically for you. You don't have to like zoom in and do all that stuff. And speaking of zooming in, so what I do a lot of, and there's ways that you can, there's things that are helpful sometimes and not other times. So like snapping, for instance, I just drew a guide there. I have snapping on over here, and I can bring this up, and it wants to there. It wants to click onto the center of that. Maybe I don't want the center clicked on there, and I see there's a stroke again too. You're going to be getting rid of strokes. Always watch to make sure there's no strokes. What happens is you do a stroke on one object, and it's going to carry that over to the next thing you do. So you have to make sure to get rid of it on the second. There's a lot of like little things that you have to watch out for that are not intuitive. But anyways, here we're going to zoom in, and I do this a lot where I move an object close, and let's say I'm going to turn this off. So snapping is off, and I'm close here, and I'm going to use the arrow keys with the Alt key and just get right on that line. And I do this all the time just to make sure that things are exactly lined up with one another, rather than relying on snapping, because when you're using really small increments, you'll try to snap and it won't do it. You'll try to snap, see that wants to snap there, but it might want to snap there instead. And when you have a lot of objects going on, there's a lot of conflicting things that it can snap to. So turning snapping on and off, when it's off you can zoom in as far as you can and get that thing over to exactly where you want it. And you can use snapping to make sure that, like if I were going to draw, so that's a good way to start drawing a square if you wanted it. If you had snapping on and you were going to draw a square here, you can see handle to guide. Okay, now I know if I zoom in, it's going to be right on that line. So, and I only use guides when I'm actively doing something that needs that guide there, and when I'm done with that, I will delete them, because you can easily have too many guides on the page that are getting distracting. So from there, the one last thing I want to bring up in this before we actually get to making something is, well, I'll just use the example that I would do for this. So I'm going to make a guide here, one there, one there. I'm going to draw some lines. I'm going to hold the control down to make sure it's straight. Double click to end it. Click, hold the control down to make sure it's straight. Double click to end it. Now both of these objects, again, of course, they have strokes, and I don't want them. So I'm hitting Shift to make sure that I select both of them, getting rid of the stroke. And now I want these two lines to be permanent guidelines underneath my project. So instead of having those guides there, because all guides end up looking the same eventually, and I want to be able to delete all guides but not get rid of these two, these two that I think I'm going to want the whole time. So I have those selected. What I'm going to do is, well, these would go on a separate layer for one thing, but you can lock them. That way, if I have objects on top of them, I can't select it, right? If I want to select everything, the guides are locked, so they're not going to be in the way, and I'm not going to accidentally move them, and I'm not going to accidentally select them and delete them with something else. See, even then, this is a good example. It snapped to the line, but it didn't snap over here. And you wouldn't know that unless you're zoomed in. So it's a good practice to just get used to zooming in just to check up on something. And use those arrow keys, because this kind of application for Inkscape is, you want to be as precise as you can, and that's the whole reason you're using it. So the next video is going to be about getting that first project populated. So see you then.